Okay.
Okay, we are going live.
Yeah. Hi, everyone, and welcome for the third session of the day. Please join me in welcoming Giovanni. He is a co-founder and the CTO of Launch Ventures UK. And before co-founding, he worked for many years as a developer, as an architect, as consultant, and he has vast experience in development, design system architecture, project management, and so many more. Is a frequent public speaker at conference and also organizer. And he also contributed two chapters to O'Reilly's book 97 Things Every Programmer Should Know. So, welcome, Giovanni.
Thank you.
And today you're going to talk about peer programming on steroids, right?
Yes, yes. More programming can be described like that. Yes.
So
Okay.
enjoy the session. If you have any question for Giovanni, feel free to write them down on the chat in the Q&A session and enjoy.
Thank you. Okay. So thank you very much, everybody. So as Karen said, today I'll be talking about mob programming that can be described as, if you like, pair programming on steroids. So I'll talk about this, sharing a story on basically a case study on how we used remote programming to help a newly formed team to deliver successfully a system in a very high pressure, high stakes environment. Yeah, and also during the talk, I'll will debunk some software development myths and see also why mob programming was the right choice to deliver high quality on time, and also we learned a lot in the process. But let's get started. So for the ones among you that don't know what mob programming is, yeah, this is a picture from when it is done or used to be done in the office. Maybe some people are doing it again in the office. Uh, is uh, is a software development approach where the whole team works on the same thing at the same time in the same space and the same computer. Basically, as Karen said, is pair programming on steroids. Instead of two people sharing a keyboard, you have the entire team sharing a keyboard. Yeah, and working together to implement a solution. Yeah. Uh, Also, mob programming is sometimes known also as ensemble programming, and some people prefer the ensemble word because the word mob has some negative connotations in English, but you can will hear both. The remote version is just like the one in the same room, but the room is a virtual one. So basically, screen sharing, somebody writing and everybody else participating, right, talking and in a video conference. And in fact, usually typical tools for remote mobbing. In my experience, I used Microsoft Zoom for the video conference and screen sharing, but we use also sometimes Slack. Nowadays, I'm using mostly Zoom for that. Then there is, I don't know if you use the JetBrains toolset, IntelliJ, the IDE for Java, Kotlin, and Android. And this has also a code with me feature, which at the time where I tried it was still a bit primitive, but sometimes useful, where instead of sharing the screen, you basically can share the IDE. And so you see others typing in the IDE. Uh, and then from time to time, we use also Tuple, but Tuple is more for pairing, so and works only on Mac and Linux. So we use this in situations where we had a mob working on some things and maybe a pair on a different aspect of the problem. A tool that I've not used, but I heard a lot about and probably will use in the future is mob.sh. Is basically a shell script that allows to pass the virtual keyboard to the next person. Because when you are mob programming, it's not that there is always the same person typing. It's like from time to time you pass the keyboard to somebody else. And this tool helps if you're using it to actually automate part of this process. Yeah, it's just like per programming, you don't have always the same person at the keyboard, but the two share time on that. Mob programming is the same. You rotate the keyboard among the participants to the mob. But let's have a look now. Well, let's start the story. So first thing, what what was the system we were working on? So to give you some context, I was at the time, this was until mid last year, I was in the team that created a COVID-19 app for England and Wales. So I started in that. We were the overall team, as in team of teams. So the development teams, managers, etc., were around 80 people. I started as the release manager for the app there, but then I led a couple of teams as well. So this is when, at the time, when I led one of those. And the particular system here was this called the SIP gateway. It was to connect the mobile app to some backend systems that allowed some eligible people that were told to self-isolate by the mobile app to claim support money from the British, well, the English and the Welsh governments. Yeah, this had to be an external system to the app because we had to collect personal data, name, surname, phone number, email, and the app itself couldn't collect any personal data whatsoever, had to be completely anonymous and was forbidden for any reason. If we did that, we would breach the agreement with Google and Apple for using their API. So we built a system, an in-between system where the app actually redirected people, was a web app, this SIP gateway, and then in that we could collect the data. Okay. Now the system itself was simple, but then we'll see what made the whole process complicated. So as I said, the environment was a high stakes one, which means the deadlines were extremely short. So let's put things this way: the prime minister had promised something to the public, and we had to deliver that. There was a system that was initially estimated for at least 6-8 weeks, but we had about 4, probably less. I think more closer to 3 weeks. There were requirements that were highly unstable and were the source of endless remote meetings. The security and accessibility constraints were pretty strong because imagine this is a system managed by a government entity. They are always under attack. So security is paramount. You cannot put something, say, but we need to put something out there, we'll take care of these security aspects later on. That was a no-no. Accessibility, as in making the system accessible to people with disabilities, was paramount as well. By law, the British government, in this case also the English one, has to create systems that are accessible to the entire population. So for example, being a web app, we couldn't arbitrarily choose, let's use React like this and go for it. Because whatever we chose had to have good accessibility. So, for example, if a web browser is not working well with JavaScript, the app had to work on those as well. Yeah, and they were not negotiable. Okay, so we couldn't say first version we'll do this, the quick thing, and then we'll do this later. That was a non-negotiable. Yeah. And also the other problems were due to high visibility. So as I said, the COVID app and all the systems related to those were really, really high visibility at the time, as you can imagine. So any issue with the system would end up in the news. So delays, we would end up in the news. Defects, we would end up in the news. And sometimes we ended up in the news also for things that were not really our fault. So we couldn't afford to fail. Okay, a failure was a no-no, and the system had to be to a good quality as well. The team was newly formed as well. Even if all of us were working for the same company, we were in different offices of the company. So I'll tell you a bit more in a sec, but was a delivery manager. There was a tech lead. I was the tech lead in this case. 5 other developers, and also some part-time experts from other teams that we needed, as I'll explain later, to get up to speed with some technologies. The team itself was distributed over 5 countries and 3 time zones. We had people in UK, in Austria, in Bulgaria, in Germany, and I can't remember now if it was. And then basically 5 countries and 3 time zones. I think that the Bulgarian colleague was 2 hours ahead of people in UK. Yeah, and everybody else was in European time, so 1 hour ahead of UK. The members were unknown to each other, so even if you work for the same company, being in different offices, we had never met before. Yeah, so we didn't even know how each other worked. We just didn't even know of each other. Yeah. And in terms of skills, only one of them was a senior. Well, not yeah, in terms of skills on and grade, only one of them was seniors. The other were at various levels between junior and intermediate. All of them, though, very capable people. Okay. And this is important as well because sometimes people have this view of seniority being so important that you cannot do without. But there are other dimensions that generally count as well. Other aspects, we had limited experience with some of the tools we had to use. So, for example, we had other parts of the system, they were using Kotlin, there were some deployments in AWS and with Lambdas, they were using Terraform, and the team, we didn't really have much experience with any of this. So basically, you can imagine our chances of failure seem to be quite high. Yeah. Now, this is where also the experts from other teams helped, is to get up to speed with the tooling. So we had people that helped us with that at the beginning. Yeah. But also in this context, with all these things happening and high stakes, setting the stage properly was extremely important. Basically, we had little time, we had to be focused, we had to deliver something. So we needed to start with the right foot. So things in setting the stage that we agreed on, I gave some guidance as tech lead to the team, was about teamwork, as in we had to work together and focus on the same time, on the same things. Grades were considered irrelevant. Basically, the point is what counts is what members bring to the table. So I do this, I've always done this, and I still do this with my teams. I don't care if anybody in my team is junior or senior. I think that anybody can have good ideas. And I've been saved by juniors enough times in the past to actually have the proof of that. Yeah. And other things to set the stage was also to avoid too much dependency on the tech lead, so on me, because I'll explain later, I was also busy with lots of other stuff, so I couldn't become a bottleneck, and nobody should be a bottleneck either. So the approach was all ideas had to be considered on their value, so even mine. So in fact, I generally spoke last to avoid people to be hooked on whatever my thoughts were. And so challenge everybody's ideas, including mine. No, it doesn't matter seniority level or anything. It's just the quality of ideas that matter. And I wasn't even there to take all the technical decisions. The thing is that, as I said, I will show you later, I was busy also with all other stuff. So the team had to have the authority to take those decisions. Yeah. So I could help the team with some of major decisions involving potentially informing some external stakeholders, but otherwise they should just be free to do whatever they thought was important. So basically my main role was to create space for them to do their job. Yeah. In these high stakes environments, bottlenecks are lethal. If I was a bottleneck or anybody else was a bottleneck, would have failed big time. And we couldn't afford this. And there were some things that were super important for some of the reasons I told you before. High quality because of failure. Automation, we automated everything. We automated with single button push, we could deploy the entire infrastructure, we could deploy the entire application. This gave us speed as well as reliability. Four eyes principle, this is one thing I insisted at the beginning. So I just didn't ask the team to do mob. I said, well, I'd like to at least pair on things. Yeah. So we avoid a situation where only some people know parts of the code base. Yeah. And then we would depend on specific individuals at the risk of bottlenecks. So 4I's principle, collective ownership, anybody could touch anything anywhere. This was expected. Again, resilience of the team. Somebody is ill. We had some cases of COVID as well in the team, or somebody cannot be at work one day. We still need to move on to proceed. Yeah. So collective code ownership was paramount, and collective accountability as well. Yeah. So it was not like wasn't me. So everybody was responsible for the results of the team. Yeah. Yeah. So this was a part of that. But then also there was, why did we end up with more programming? So as I said, initially I said I at least like people to pair. Yeah, but ideally mobbing. So we wanted resilience. just explain, and everybody knows the code base, so we can proceed even if some people are not working some days. Learning, uh, this was important as well. We didn't know all the tools we had to use, and so we had to speed up learning, and working together helped that a lot because people also shared the bit of experience they had to bring everybody up to speed, and quality as well. So more people looking at the design and the code could help implementing many issues. Yeah, we didn't have any design by committee, fortunately, because we agreed on judge ideas by their merit, not the proposer or any particular random preference. Yeah, and we stuck to that. And more programming helps a lot with this. Yeah, and then there were also other aspects. Of course, working remotely, each of us at home, sometimes it feels isolated, and more programming helps a lot with that. We found out that it was much more enjoyable to work together as well. And it was better teamwork. We were working together all the time. Later on, I'll talk also about some issues we had and, well, how few of them we had, which was good. Um, there is also well, and fewer bottlenecks. I'll explain this in a minute, but also one thing that is important to know is that I'll mention this now, is that we had more than one mob. So sometimes we were working in one mob all to the entire team, sometimes in two, sometimes a mob and a pair, things like this, because uh, there were situations where we mob in parallel, but was not like you do the front end, we do the back end, was other aspects. So for example, we had sometimes people working more on the infrastructure, on the deployment and Terraform infrastructure automation, some others on the system itself. So we found a way in some situations where we could really parallelize work in a productive manner, okay? But never having people working alone, at least pairing. So it's kind of highly dynamic. And sometimes the people join one mob and then left that mob and joined another one, yeah? So highly dynamic. The important thing is that we always knew what we were doing and we were in sync with each other about how we were proceeding, yeah? Okay. Uh, Interestingly, we had a fewer bottlenecks as well because by mobbing, what we did is that we did trunk-based development. So no feature branches, not at all. No feature branches, no merge requests, pull requests, or stuff like this. So trunk-based development, push into trunk, small increments, all tested and push into trunk frequently, all the time. Yeah, or to main. I think in Git is called main. Yeah. So no feature branches, nothing like that at all. When we use feature branches was just some experiments to figure out something maybe and then just remove them. Yeah, they were not a way for us to actually merge code in the main branch. Mobbing also was a shortcut to the forming, storming, norming, performing phase of team performance. So if you ever heard of this, often new teams, there are phases in which people that don't know each other try to understand the dynamics, how things work. And so there are situations where there is, especially at the beginning, quite a lot of conflict on ideas, on how to agree on things, lots of disagreements. But somehow working together as a mob from the very beginning accelerated this process, and we didn't really have major issues at all. We were on day two, we were already highly productive, yeah, which was a major advantage for us. And mitigated the effect of bad days as well. I don't know if it happens to you, but I have definitely bad days. There are those days in which I really don't feel like working much. But so if I'm left to my own devices, I may end up doing doom scrolling on Twitter, some stuff like this. When you work with a mob or a pair, what happens is that it, this helps you being productive. So even in bad days, you can actually contribute, give a positive contribution to the team, which is an added bonus and is particularly important when they are short of time, yeah, with an important release. And also avoids the situation where people are blocked, waiting for somebody else. And this is a very important aspect, yeah, because one thing about mobbing or pairing that you hear often is, what about speed? It's like we are on a short deadlines. We need to parallelize as much as possible. So the best way to do this is to give each person their own tasks. Yeah, this is intuitively correct, but factually wrong. Yeah. So the reality is that goes against intuition, because in practice, what happens is that even if you have people, each of them working on their own tasks, they will have to synchronize at some point. They will have to talk to each other. Yeah. And so, and often people get blocked, especially people that are less experienced. Sometimes they've never faced some kind of problems and they don't know how to proceed. Now, that is bad enough when you're in the same office. When you're remote, it's even worse, because in an office, you can go and tap somebody on the shoulder. When you are remote, it's much more difficult to do that. Yeah. Even if we uh, did the equivalent at some point, that was basically ringing somebody on Slack, basically making noises so people could attract attention, but it's not an ideal situation. Then things like when people go in parallel, they say we want quality, we go for pull requests and merge requests, which become a big time sink. Yeah. So if you pair or mob, you are actually reviewing the code as you go, and you prevent mistakes instead of trying to review them out of your code base later. Yeah. So we avoid that time sink as well. Splitting work incurs in the risk of rework because of misunderstanding. You'll do the front end, I'll do the back end. Okay, we kind of understand how to interface, then we do our own thing, we connect the two, and something doesn't work because there was a misunderstanding in part of, I don't know, the JSON that the back end was sending to front end. Yeah. If you work together from the very beginning and do that together, these misunderstandings are less likely to happen. Yeah. Or other aspects of to go faster, we do less testing, that is just a terrible, terrible myth. In fact, if you put a lot of automated testing, we use actually TDD, so test-driven development, and with lots of automated tests, that allowed us to go extremely quick, because any modification that would affect badly existing parts of the code was spot immediately. Some tests would fail. Yeah. So actually, counterintuitively, we went faster than splitting out work. Okay, so no, it's not something that I was predicting when we started it, but it's something I was hoping for. Yeah. Then, of course, there are other aspects that are important, not only for mobbing, but they are fundamental if you want to succeed in anything. That is, you need to have clear, meaningful goals for the team. So basically, the team, everybody needs to know what they are going to achieve. Yeah, what is expected from them, what is that we have to deliver. Resources and support. So to give you an example, software licenses, hardware. We had one of in the team that had a Windows machine that was very temperamental. Everybody else had Macs in that company. We use Macs as standard. What I did, I spoke with management. This was the guy in Bulgaria, and we had a Mac sent to his address, and he got it in 1 or 2 days. And being the Windows machine that is not working, use this one instead. So this kind of support as well. It's not simply, we cannot give you a new laptop. You have to make do with whatever you've got. And by the way, you still have the deadline there looming. Yeah. Psychological safety. So this is about what I said before also. Respecting everybody's ideas, everybody counts. So is about the quality of your contribution, not about your seniority level within the company. That is completely irrelevant in that. Is about the ability to actually talk freely with each other, which I'll give you some examples of how did we made it happen. Listen, being helpful, all these kind of things. Autonomy and authority, part of it is what I said before. I said the team, they could decide how to get on with stuff because I was busy doing other things in the meantime. I had to be involved in some decision, but most of them I completely trusted them. They were fully autonomous and had the authority to take all the decisions uh, they thought were important ones to move on. And yeah, so doing these things is obviously it's easy to mention them, but it's generally a lot of hard work to make them happen. Yeah. So it's not easy as you make them happen, but that was part of my job, helping fostering an environment when this was happening. Yeah. So we were aiming at real self-organization, if you like, of the team. And for this, none of these points is actually optional. Then, of course, what happens in high-stakes environments is that they come with a big number of meetings and stakeholders with plenty of opinions to share. You can't imagine how many people that don't know anything about the system have an opinion on how you should go on with that. And so a big chunk of my work was actually being that meetings, being the technical ambassador for the team towards the other stakeholders, explaining our choices, explaining what we are doing, explaining why some things could be in scope and some others should be descoped, maybe for a future release of the system and things like this. And myself and the delivery manager actually had acted as what Copeland calls a firewall and gatekeeper. I actually realized this after the fact. It's not that we, by design, said, "Oh, let's be the firewall and gatekeeper." Maybe I was influenced by this book because I read it several times in the past, but I realized after the fact that this is what we did. So what we did was protect the team from external interference. Yeah. So is the firewall. It's like people don't go there, disturb the rest of the team so they can do their job. But also the gatekeeper was about making sure that we could we allowed in the good interactions we needed with the external environment to the team. So basically is keep the noise out, manage all the external stakeholders as much as possible, but let the useful communication filter in so the team had the information they needed. And of course, the team had the ability to contact, to talk with whoever they need to talk with for to do their job. So in this kind of environments, you probably will end up in a situation where you need to do this to be sure that the team works well. So it's not really strictly related to more programming, but it's related to give the team the space they need to do their job. And typical day, we had a virtual stand-up call just to be in sync, but generally the report was per mob. So if the day before there were people in different mobs or in different pairs, we would convene a virtual stand-up call just so everybody was in sync. And the reporting was per mob, not per person. Yeah, I work with others. It's pointless that all the people in the same mob say the same thing, even if anybody could talk, because sometimes, you know, I could say something, forget something else, and somebody that was working with me could say, "Oh, you forgot about this," and so synchronize the others on those aspects. Then join a virtual mob room. So we had some kind, I think at some point in Microsoft Teams, we created some calls, some recurring calls every day with a link that we had three of them, I think, three mob rooms. So we could join any of those and then to join any of the mobs. This was like the equivalent of having the space in the office for us. Then join the mob and do your work. The delivery manager and I usually would join calls with the external stakeholders. My calendar was full of those, so I joined some the mobs occasionally, not as often as I would have liked, but my role was there to manage the other stakeholders. So we would join the calls with various other people and bring back to the team the information, any new information we had or new direction or anything we needed to do. Yeah. In tools, we tried, I said Microsoft Teams, we use Slack, we use JetBrains Intelligence, we use Tuple when there was pairing. And nowadays, in my teams now, we use a lot Zoom. So none of them is perfect. Yeah, so my recommendation for that is just try the ones you can and decide for yourself if you want to try remote mobbing. Decide for yourself which one works best for you, really. This is the best recommendation I have. As I said, team issues, there weren't that many, but we had a few, surprisingly few actually, and I think that working together all the time was part of it. Initially, they were discussed in private, so some colleagues, team members that had miscommunication with others didn't know initially, no, I don't know the person, I don't know how to approach this person to raise the issue, the concern in a way that is not too offensive. And so they tended to come to me as the tech lead, and all I did was help them to frame the issue in a way that was about the issue itself, not about the other person, and encourage them to talk with each other. And everybody started doing that. to the point that we could openly talk about anything without any fear. Yeah, even calling bullshit on each other or telling in the mob, look, this idea sucks to somebody because of this and that, and nobody will get offended. Yeah, but at the beginning, people tended to come to me. I think this is probably will happen in any team, mobbing or not, is something that happens. But the interesting thing is that I think that the fact that you work in a mob all the time from the very beginning, all the issues were fewer and were solved much more quickly. Yeah, because we couldn't simply pretend they were not there. You know, if I'm working alone and I have an issue with a teammate, it's like the incentive to solve that is less because it's kind of solving these kind of issues can be work. It's difficult. We don't want to have sometimes difficult conversations. So we say, okay, I pretend it's not there. Anyway, I'm working alone. So that's it. In a situation where you see the same person again and again all the time, every day, the incentive to actually remove all these clouds, yeah, and all these issues is pretty high. Yeah. And in fact, the team will became very let's say a very good gelled team very quickly. Yeah, I believe also that probably, I don't have any data for that, but probably the fact that we work for the same organization might have an influence on that, because anyway, some working norms were similar, if not the same. Yeah. Of course, different time zones can be a problem. As I said, 3 time zones. So the only person in Bulgaria who was 2 hours from us in UK and 1 hour from everybody else in Europe would start earlier than everybody else, and so he was alone for the first few hours of the day. And so in those situations, you have to find a way to avoid the trap of feature branching merge request because somebody else has to see things. And so usually those were times in which we did some research on stuff or solve other problems. Basically, uh, do some work that was useful but was not as critical as some potential coding, some coding that could be, potentially problematic. Yeah. So this is, I don't have a recipe that works for every team. So if you mob and you have people in different time zones, you need to experiment. You can try to accommodate, maybe somebody works a bit earlier, somebody starts a bit later, so to have a big overlap. Or maybe if you have people in different countries, maybe the mobs then can be, in different time zones, the mobs can be by time zone. I don't know. If you have this problem, you really need to try by yourself what works for you. We at some point in a team, we had actually somebody in Singapore, and this person somehow decided to work UK hours. And it was interesting because asking, how do you do this? Because for him, he ended up always working very late. And for some reason, worked for him. I mean, worked for us, and he was fine with that. But I don't really recommend doing that. But, you can find your own solution. Of course, when we call about remote work, we always talk about the disadvantages. Yeah, we are not in the same office. We cannot really talk, socialize in the usual ways. Is kind of, there are all sorts of problems, and we recognize that. Working from home alone and connecting only via video conference is not my definition of fun. Yeah, but it's not only disadvantages. There are also some advantages. So for mobbing, a big advantage is that you don't need to book a meeting room. So what I find is that when we are in the office, generally finding a meeting room was hell because they're always, booked for meetings. And so, and if you work in a mob, you need this space for extended periods of time every day. So which is in many situations is just impossible. Yeah. Mobs can be created on demand. Online is much easier to do that. Yeah, you don't need to say, okay, now we'll go, let's find an empty room. Oh, there is no empty room. It's kind of, okay, we need to work on this together. Let's do this. Let's create a call. Join there. Let's do that. Easy. Yeah, and use the online tools to do that. Access to a wider talent pool. We were 5 countries, so we had people from different places. So makes it easier to have the people you need in the team. Yeah, if you are bound to the office, the people you have are the ones that can go to the office. It's not always the case that they are the best people for the problem you have to solve. Yeah. So the fact that you can find people anywhere. If this is a big advantage as well. And the last one that is seems to be a bit of a joke, but it isn't. Nobody can see you doing it. Now, in companies where even managers say, we do mobbing, we are pairing, we promote all this stuff, we are cool because we do this. I know that when they see you doing that, many of them get very nervous because deep inside they don't really believe that will work. They believe that actually splitting, parallelizing goes faster, even if they don't have any supporting data for that. And this can create all sorts of tension. When you're online, working remotely, nobody sees that. Yeah. So you have much more freedom to experiment. And mind you, I'm saying that also as a manager. I'm a CTO now of my own company. We have got around 30 people. It's a small company. And I encourage people to do that. Yeah. So I'm not saying that as a devious developer. I'm saying that also as someone that has done that as a possibly devious developer, but that now also has some management duties and believes in this approach. Yeah. And in fact, in this specific case, we actually succeeded. We delivered high quality production on time. Now, we did some overtime, okay? So there is no hiding behind that. It's not that since we were mobbing, we could avoid overtime. Unfortunately, the timelines were so short that we had to do that. So we had to do a couple of weekends. On the other hand, working together in this way, the overtime was somehow easier because we weren't alone in our room. I wasn't alone at home in the night or on a Saturday doing stuff. I was with other people online, talking with them, sometimes joking, but solving problems together. So this made the situation much more bearable. Yeah. Uh, we had happy stakeholders. Now, also, what happens, we were successful, but was almost last minute on the finishing line. So I was telling Karen before that the delivery of this was interesting because we, until the evening before the official launch date, we were sorting out some security issues that we found with penetration testing. And also, as I said, we have every issue we had to have automated tests. So we were also putting automated tests in place for this thing. And we had a cutoff time of 8 p.m. on the day before the official release date because if we couldn't release, so if we couldn't be sure by that time that we could release the next day, we had to inform the press office of the Prime Minister in UK so they could craft a message for the press on next day, basically telling them why there was a delay and explaining the population what was going to happen next, which you can imagine was not really an outcome we wanted. We managed to be ready 1 or 2 hours before the deadline with a great cheers of the stakeholders and happiness of the team. This thing went in production with no known bugs at all, zero. When we had issues with the system in production was always some of the external systems connected to us that had issues, not ours. So this worked like a clock. And this was due also to all the things we did to keep quality high. So it was not simply a hack. So we actually managed to deliver some really, truly high quality in production. It was incredibly good for the team as well. It was really hard work, but everybody was really happy that we managed to do that. So had a very strong binding effect on us as a team as well. Now, this was not even a one-off. So we actually did it again. So after this team, we took charge of another system. We were merged with another team, an existing one, where we basically replicated the model. This other team, we had also people in Asia. So also the guy that was working late hours, that I said, and everything worked actually very well also there. And another team for which they asked me for as a consultant some uh, opinions because they were having issues with their project, with a customer, unhappy customer, all sorts of things going wrong. Um, Knowledge in the team concentrated in a few people, stuff like this. I suggested them to try mobbing because could have helped them address all those problems. They tried that, and actually also that project went into a much better direction as well. So I have, I'm convinced that this is, of course, my data is anecdotal, but I've seen this working several times, and also currently in the projects I'm working on, we are doing the same successful. That I'm convinced that is actually not a fluke or a one-off. It's just the fact that mob programming really works very well to in many dimensions. Yeah, and so that's it. Now these are all the slides I had. I think if there are any questions.
Yes, there are a few questions. How much time in a day can we do this? Wouldn't it be stressful?
Now I can tell you this. So it's very intense. It's really intense. Then it depends also on the team. So we actually had days of 12 hours doing this. Okay. So, but we are tiring. Uh, so it depends. There isn't a number. Is it very intense? So maybe if a mobbing session of 2, 3 hours, you need quite a break. You probably need frequent breaks. But we had that also very long days. So it depends. Stressful. When you are working well with a team, it's actually enjoyable. Yeah, it's tiring but enjoyable. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what about different people? Someone prefers working alone and not so much into talking. Someone might have home office, not in the state, to be all the time on live, audio, video, living in a small flat, whether the office is
So
kitchen.
yeah, so all the
So, how do you
usual
ensure?
problems
Yeah.
of homework. Yeah, kids and pets and everything. So first of all, the working alone. The working alone is a problem, mobbing or not mobbing. Yeah, it's always a problem. You can't have in a team people that prefer to work alone and come back, because they will have to share whatever they've done with the others. And code reviews, merge requests are not a solution to that at all. Also, as I said, mobs are dynamic, so you don't stay in the mob all the time. If you feel you need a break, you just go and have a break by yourself as well. We did that all the time, yeah. So you can decompress a bit, or sometimes what you can do is to do some research for the team, yeah, and do that alone, and then come back with information. So there are ways to uh, make the situation a bit less intense. If living at home and stuff, well, in a small flat, if you can, we had people in small flats, so virtual backgrounds and things like this. For noise, something that I found out, I use a software called Crisp, written with a K, that actually does an excellent job in removing background noise from your own microphone, but also from the sound of others. It's really unbelievable. And that's all the problems, some problems we had with that. And so, yeah, virtual backgrounds and this kind of software help a lot.
Yeah.
I work with people that have small kitchens at the moment. Yeah,
So, how do you make sure to that the mob room doesn't end up in off-talk topics,
that is
off-topic talks, and
that
everything like
is
that?
the goals. When people have clear goals and know what they need to achieve and what they are working on, what happens is everybody keeps an eye on everybody else. Yeah, it's actually interesting because it's peer pressure there. Yeah, at some point there will always if you go off topic, as it happens, somebody will say, "Hold on, guys, stop now. We are doing this," and then everybody goes, with the head like this. After your mom finds you out, go, "Okay, okay, sorry," and go back. So there is this. Everybody keeps an eye on others and works well. The important thing is that you have a common goal and you know what you need to achieve. Yeah. Otherwise, it's far too easy to go in different directions.
Okay. So, thank you very much, Giovanni. It was really interesting talk. And thank you all very much for attending. Keep participating in the session for a chance to win an ebook from our partner Pact, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks, Giovanni.
Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.